There's a line of Stephen Spender's, "I think continually of those who are truly great." It's not really about the long-lasting effects of wisdom or greatness. To me it says you can continually remember someone even if they weren't altogether great. I've never been personally close to death that I know of. Loved ones who have died have been in an age where death is expected if not welcome. I think of them from time to time, not continually. There are a few deaths, however, that I do think of in what can be called a continuous manner. They happened long ago to people I was not particularly close to, but their images will come to me at the strangest times, so much so that they have become familiar to me, rather like a friend one sees only now and then. These images speak to me, but I confess that I don't know what to do with them. Their stories seem to want to be told. I hope that by telling someone I can put them to rest.
The girl who lived across the street.
She was kind of a wild girl. Her parents were divorced and she lived with her mother and two older brothers. My parents didn't trust her to babysit me. Her brother Tim worked for my father over the summers. He came to rely on my father a lot. When he was thrown in jail for doing 97 and I-95, it was my father he called. Rachel would come over and play with me, and then I wouldn't see her for weeks. She scared me, but at the same time, I wanted her to like me. By the time I was 12, I was tired of her and ended up thinking of her as a mixed-up kid, which is what my mother said she was. They moved that year. One Sunday, 5 years later, I opened the paper and found out she was dead. She had been driving alone late at night and smashed into a tree. To me, she had been dead for years. For that matter, she had never seemed fully alive. I can never picture her growing up, and now she never would.
The lawyer I visited on career day.
When I was a sophomore in high school, I spent a day with a lawyer friend of my father's. It was pretty boring, but he was a pleasant man. He took me out to lunch at Top of the Park, which at 15 really impressed me. 2 months later, his wife and 2 children flew to Aspen for the holidays. Mr. Gray was going to join them in a few days. When he didn't arrive on his scheduled flight, Mrs. Gray called the house. There was no answer. Next she phoned a neighbor who found him in the house, dead. A heart attack at 43. All I could think of was the phone ringing, and him not being alive to answer.
John Bailey.
Mr. Bailey was another local attorney, and I had known him since I was a child. I played with his kids, I knew all his pets, and I was one of the first people to know he had died. I was walking home from school, and there was an ambulance outside the Bailey house. I ran into my house and called my mother. She told me not to worry, that she would call me back as soon as she had found out what had happened. What had happened is that Mr. Bailey had closed the door, gotten into his car, and left the motor running. I remember that the front door of the Bailey house was always open. My father told me it was an old Irish custom, and besides, the screen door was locked. Why would a man who kept his front door open go and do something like that?
Someone I never knew.
When my mother was 18 years old, her father was killed by a mugger on Orchard Street, where they used to live. I don't remember my mother ever talking to me about this, ever, and of course I never bring it up. I know if he had lived, we would have been close. Yet when I think of his death, it's hard for me to feel anything. I don't know if it's a flaw in my character or what, but as long as no one talks about it, who will ever know? But why do I always remember he had less than $2 on him, and that the hearse was given an honorary police escort on the way to the cemetery? So, those are the little dustings I play with, like coins I jangle in my pocket. Maybe someday a story will come out of one of them.